Today we are looking at a case from the second part of the 19th century, so sit back as we go to the USA. Zora Burns was born in Missouri in 1861, but while she was still an infant, her family moved to the small community of St. Elmo in Fayette County, Illinois, where her father, Mr. William Burns, took up work as a wagon maker. In 1864, tragedy struck the family when Zora's mother died. The next few years were difficult, but after some time, Mr. Burns remarried, and his new wife took charge of the household. Life in rural Illinois during the 1860s and 1870s offered only limited opportunities for girls. In small communities such as St. Elmo, schooling was usually provided by local one-room schools, and attendance depended largely on the needs of the family. Children often attended for a few months of the year, fitting lessons around farm work and household duties. Many girls were expected to contribute to the family economy, assisting with domestic labor at home or seeking employment nearby, typically sewing, helping on neighboring farms, or working in other households. Like many young women raised in such surroundings, Zora eventually left her father's house to seek employment elsewhere, and in her early 20s, she traveled to the town of Lincoln in Logan County, Illinois, where she obtained work as a domestic servant. Her employer was Mr. Orrin A. Carpenter, a prominent grain merchant and one of the wealthiest men in the region. He lived with his wife Helen, his elderly mother, and his two daughters, Mary and Frances. He was considered to be a respectable businessman with a reputation for honesty and devotion to his family. Zora began working in the Carpenter household in late 1882 and continued there through the first half of 1883. She was a very pretty young woman, and her appearance soon drew the attention of people around the town. Her duties were those typical of a domestic servant, and included cleaning the house and preparing meals. She earned $1.50 per week, which, although her food and lodging were provided as part of the arrangement, was still a small wage for the time. Dissatisfied with her pay, she threatened to leave her position, but Mr. Carpenter persuaded her to remain in his service. He bought her an expensive pair of shoes and promised to increase her weekly wages by an additional $1. However, he asked that she did not mention the shoes or the increase in pay to his wife. Zora decided to remain in his employment, but eventually she thought it would be better to leave. On the 1st of September 1883, she returned to her father's home in St. Elmo. A few weeks before she returned home, she went to visit her sister Frances, who lived with her husband, Mr. William Jukes, in the town of Wayne in Illinois. While staying there, she met Mr. Thomas Jukes, her brother-in-law's brother, and the acquaintance soon developed into a courtship. Before long, the two became engaged and planned to get married in late October 1883. As she was making preparations for the wedding, Zora told her father that she intended to travel to Lincoln in order to collect money she believed Mr. Carpenter still owed her. She said that he still owed her some unpaid wages from her time working in his household. On Friday the 12th of October 1883, she left St. Elmo and travelled by train to Lincoln, which was a distance of about 80 miles. The following day, however, she had not returned home, and when she had still not arrived back on Sunday, her family began to grow uneasy. On the morning of Monday the 15th of October 1883, the body of a young woman was discovered in a secluded lane north of 17th Street on the outskirts of Lincoln. The spot was a quiet country road, little used by travellers. When the authorities arrived and examined the body, it became clear that a violent crime had taken place. The young woman had suffered severe injuries. Her forehead had been crushed by heavy blows, and her arms bore bruises suggesting that she had struggled with her attacker. 2 distinct cuts were visible upon her head, indicating that she had been struck with considerable force. More shocking of all, her throat had been cut. A medical examination later revealed another troubling fact. The young woman had been 4 or 5 months pregnant. It was not long before the body was identified as that of Miss Zora Burns. The authorities contacted her father, who travelled to Lincoln, and when he was shown the body, he immediately recognized it to be his daughter. Mr. William Burns became very emotional. He was deeply shaken by what he had seen and struggled to maintain his composure. Following the formal identification, investigators began reconstructing Zora's final movements. The first person to attract suspicion was Mr. Thomas Jukes, the man Zora had intended to marry. However, Mr. Jukes was able to provide an alibi, placing him elsewhere between the 12th and 15th of October. Once his whereabouts had been verified, suspicion shifted towards Mr. Orrin Carpenter, Zora's previous employer. There were several circumstances that led authorities to examine his possible connection with the crime. Witnesses had reported seeing him and Zora together on numerous occasions, both during and after her employment in his household. Some said that they had seen the pair walking together after dark, while others recalled them riding together in Mr. Carpenter's buggy. There were other witnesses who suggested that their acquaintance had extended beyond Lincoln. At one point, the two were said to have travelled to Peoria, a city on the Illinois River and one of the principal commercial and manufacturing centres of the state. Here it was claimed that Mr. Carpenter had registered at a hotel, taken 2 adjoining rooms, and registered Zora as his daughter. Evidence also emerged of letters exchanged between the two, and Zora's father told the police that he had letters written by Mr. Carpenter, some of which contained money. Other witnesses claimed to have seen the correspondence between them and suggested that they had more than an employer-employee relationship. A woman named Mrs. Dengler also spoke to the police. She told them that Zora had stayed with her for a while after leaving the Carpenter household, and claimed that the young woman had told her that she was pregnant and that Mr. Carpenter was the father of the child. Another witness, Mrs. R.J. Carpenter of Decatur, who was not related to Mr. Orrin Carpenter, told investigators that Zora had been corresponding with both Mr. Jukes and Mr. Carpenter, and according to her, the letters indicated that Zora's relationship with Mr. Carpenter involved not only personal matters, but also requests for money. The lady said that Zora appeared to be troubled during her stay and had asked her repeatedly about surgeons in the town who could help with her condition. When Mr. Carpenter's buggy was examined, police found what they believed to be blood on the seat and the reins. The stains were examined under a microscope, and they were concluded to be blood, though the science at the time was not able to determine whose blood it was, or even whether it was human. Hairpins were also found lodged into the seat cushions of the buggy, and these were the same type of hairpins found in Zora's pocket when her body was discovered. Taken together, these circumstances were considered strong enough to detain Mr. Carpenter, and after interviewing him further, he was charged with the murder of Zora Burns. On the 28th of October, the coroner's inquest began, and the courtroom quickly filled with a crowd, as people became very interested in hearing the evidence that had placed one of the county's previously respected citizens behind bars. The first witness was Mr. Thomas Jukes, who gave a clear account of where he had been the days before and on the night of the tragedy, and provided the names of several people who had been at his home, which included the postmaster and his wife, who both confirmed his whereabouts. He explained that he had been engaged to Zora, and that they had planned to be married on the 31st of October. Zora's father and stepmother sat listening to his testimony, and they were next on the witness stand. They both said that Zora had spent very little time living at their home during the previous 4 years, and that she had come to work in Lincoln at the end of 1882. Mr. Burns also spoke of an unsigned letter that his daughter had received from Lincoln, which read, "Zora, why don't you come? Come right away. I have written you 2 letters before and sent you money in both. Someone must be taking your mail and money as well. Come now. Come immediately." He said that Zora had told him that the letter had been written by Mr. Orrin Carpenter, and stated that his daughter's letters were never opened by anyone else. When asked if, when living with him and his wife in St. Elmo, shortly before her tragic return to Lincoln, if she had been taking any medicine, he replied that she had not, and that he had only seen her taking red pepper tea. He added that he had no suspicion that anything was wrong with her. Miss Jenny Boyle, who worked in Lincoln for a family who lived next door to the Carpenters, told the court that she saw Zora almost every day. She described her as generally well behaved, and that she had never heard any bad reports about her character. She also said that she had never seen her with Mr. Carpenter. Other witnesses spoke of Mr. Orrin Carpenter's good character, and there was no one who could place him with Zora following her return to Lincoln on Friday the 12th of October. When the coroner's inquest ended, the jury concluded that Miss Zora Burns had indeed been murdered, but they were unable to say who was responsible. Mr. Carpenter was then released on bail, while the case awaited a review by the grand jury. Public reaction to this was intense, especially in Lincoln. Many residents believed that Mr. Carpenter's wealth had influenced the jury, and rumours began to circulate that detectives had been encouraged by the defence to overlook certain evidence. The tension in the town rose so much that police from nearby towns and cities were put on alerts in case violence erupted. Meanwhile, the investigation continued to produce strange and sometimes confusing leads. a jeweler reported that two young men had sold him rings, one of which bore the name Zora Burns. There was also a man from Hampton in Iowa who told the authorities that he had been hired to kill the young woman. Neither report resulted in reliable evidence, but the stories added further mystery to the case. On January 25, 1884, the grand jury returned an indictment, formally charging Mr. Carpenter with murder. Unlike the proceedings before the coroner's courts, bail was refused on this occasion, and the prisoner was taken to jail to await trial. However, because of the intense publicity and the strong public feeling in Logan County, his legal representatives requested a change of venue. They argued that widespread newspaper coverage had created prejudice against their clients, and that this had made a fair trial impossible in Lincoln. The request was granted, and the case was transferred to the town of Petersburg, in the neighbouring county. The trial began on the 10th of March, 1884. The prosecution's case rested largely on circumstantial evidence. They argued that Mr. Orrin Carpenter and Miss Zora Burns had been involved in a secret relationship that had resulted in her pregnancy. According to their theory, Mr. Carpenter may have offered money either to conceal her situation or to persuade her to end the pregnancy. However, when the matter could not be resolved, the conflict had turned violent. The defence challenged these claims and adopted what seemed to be a rather overbearing attitude towards the prosecution. Some of the most influential men in Petersburg were involved in the defence, and the sympathies of the officials clearly appeared to be on that side. Some newspapers wrote that Mr. Carpenter was treated more like a victim than a man believed to be guilty of one of the foulest, cruelest, and most cold-blooded murders ever tried in the region. It was even reported that the prisoner had dined with the sheriff while in custody. Only one of Mr. Carpenter's daughters appeared in courts. She wore bright clothing, spoke freely with her companions, and did not appear at all intimidated by the seriousness of the situation. When the state called her, they asked if either she or her sister could have been the woman who occupied the room next to her father's at the hotel in Peoria. In her answer, she tried to be as uncooperative as possible and answered the questions with a clear indifference, but she did eventually admit that she and her sister were in Missouri at the time. Several other witnesses were called to give testimony. Mr. Henry Ahearns, who had lent Mr. Carpenter $10 when he was travelling on the train to Peoria, said that he saw a woman with him that he believed was Zora Burns, and the hotel clerk and the chambermaid also described the woman as looking like Zora and said that Mr. Carpenter tried to keep her in the background. Zora's father and stepmother were also called. They told of her character, her life, and her movements up to when she returned to Lincoln on the 12th of October, 1883. Orrin Carpenter did not take the stand in his own defence. Instead, his lawyers argued that the case was built on speculation rather than proof. They questioned the reliability of the witnesses and pointed out that none of the alleged letters between Mr. Carpenter and Zora had been produced in court. They also pointed out that no bloodstained clothing belonging to the accused had been discovered. When the trial ended, the judge reviewed the main points of the evidence and reminded the juries of the questions they must decide. The lawyers for both the prosecution and the defence had already made their closing speeches, each urging the jurors to view the testimony in their client's favour. The jury then retired to consider the verdict. On the morning of the 21st of March 1884, they returned to the courtroom and announced that they found the defendants, Mr. Orrin Carpenter, not guilty. Although this verdict cleared him in the eyes of the law, many of the citizens of Logan County remained unconvinced. Public opinion in Lincoln was very much against him, and a public meeting was soon called, which was attended by an estimated 4,000 residents of the area. Those present decided that Mr. Carpenter should no longer remain in Logan County, and 75 men were appointed to deliver that message to him. However, when they did, he denied any wrongdoing and refused to acknowledge that the group had any right to order his departure. But the hostility did not end there. Zora's father, Mr. William Burns, openly expressed his desire for revenge. On one occasion, he was seen walking through Lincoln with a shotgun under his arm, saying that he was waiting for Mr. Carpenter, as he intended to shoot him. He was persuaded to return home, but the tension continued. On December 2nd, 1884, Mr. William Burns once again went in search of Mr. Carpenter, and when he found him, he fired his revolver, but the shot missed. By this time, Mr. Carpenter had already begun preparing to leave the region. His property and business interests were up for sale. Shortly afterwards, he and his family moved to the Dakota Territory, but it was reported that the expense of the trial had greatly reduced his once considerable fortune. Despite the suspicions that continued to surround the case, and the fact that the jury had decided that the evidence presented at the trial had not been enough to prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt, no one else was ever tried for the murder of Zora Burns, and the case remains officially unsolved, one of the most troubling and controversial crimes in the history of the region. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next Brief Case.